Welcome to Polityka Insight video. Our guest today is Ambassador Daniel Fried, someone whose 40 years career in the diplomatic service of the United States makes him uniquely positioned to speak about Poland and the region. Ambassador Fried, thanks for joining me. Many people around the world, including in the United States, are worried about the developments in Poland. The government's agenda is sometimes being very strongly criticized, and some decisions are being described as undemocratic. Having served in Poland from mid-80s to the 2000s, what is your view about where is Poland heading?
Poland has had enormous historical success over the past 30 years. Remember, it was a country that was poor under communism and is no longer poor. There is poverty in Poland, but this is no longer a poor country. And Poles should take enormous pride in this achievement. Poland was unsecure. It is now in NATO. Poles, again, are the authors of their own success. Now, you mentioned the current government. There is a case to be made for conservative arguments in Poland. And some of the things this government have done, like 500+, have turned out rather well. There's a case to be made, for example, for a Europe of nations and for a sense of patriotism having a place in modern Europe. And Poland could make this kind of a case. The Prime Minister's speech just now touched on the problem of a sense of a lack of justice, of a lack of social justice, of a lack of fairly distributed economic benefits. Again, this government has a case, but it needs to advance its case in ways that advance and build on Poland's interest in being part of a united Europe and part of a united West. We want to help Poland because a strong Poland is in my country's interests. But some of the government's moves, for example, nowelizacji IPN, have created for Poland completely unnecessary complications. World War II raises awful historical questions, but Poland has nothing to be ashamed of. Its role, the role of the Polish state, was heroic, and the role of Polish people was heroic. And there were individuals in Poland who did bad things. But that is not, recognizing that, is not kompromitacji narodu polskiego. That frees Poland. And it means that Poland is just like everybody else. We all of us have done, our nations have all done things that need to be questioned. The United States did things in World War II which are morally questionable, and we did it as a nation, as a government. I have in mind, the firebombing of Dresden, or the use of nuclear weapons against Japan. I'm not saying these were evil things, but they are morally questionable. And honest governments, honest people must ask those questions. In Poland, the Polish state behaved honorably. Its objective was to resist the Nazis, and its policy was to help the Jews. That's a fact. And Poland has nothing to fear from honest historical scholarship, which will show nothing than the fact that Poles are imperfect like the rest of us.
This recent crisis is very much about putting history into legal framework, or interpretation of history into legal framework.
And that never works out well. That never works out well. What the irony here is that Poland was winning the historical argument. It is now not only accepted, but everyone is sensitive to the fact the tak zwany polskie obozy koncentracyjne not only never existed, but that is a historical kłamstwo and false. And I remember when the Obama administration used that phrase, there was an instant and justified angry reaction from Poles. Oh, and by the way, from the Polish Jewish community, they also objected to it as historically false, and it was. Poland is winning the argument. That is, it is now recognized more and more what Poland's role was in World War II, and the individual bad acts, Jedwabne, for example, and others, and Kielce in after the war. These are recognized as bad acts by individual, not in the name of the Polish state or government or nation. They were bad acts, and people do bad things. And this needs to be understood and revealed and discussed, but it is not a kompromitacja of the Polish nation anymore. Well, as an American, what our responsibility for the original terrible American sin of slavery is much greater and much deeper, because that was a state policy. And we must live with the legacy of that. Poland's responsibility for the bad acts of individuals is not anywhere near the level of our responsibility for our bad acts. Poland has nothing to be ashamed of, and there is no need of a law to protect the good name of Poland. Historical research will do that adequately.
But the damage has been done, in some fields very significant. We all know the wording of State Department statement about Poland. If you were asked for advice how to get out of this crisis, what would you say?
Oh, the Polish government knows perfectly well how to get out of it. It's just not easy. I hope that the Polish government will find a way to channel this discussion away from politics into the hands of historians, where it belongs. And Poland can be confident that that discussion will turn out well for Poland. Honest history is Poland's friend. Legalizing the issue suggests Poland has something to hide. Poland has nothing to hide. It has nothing to hide. Polish scholarship has revealed the hard truths of the bad actions of individuals. But that is not the Polish nation. Those are individuals. Just as American scholarship has revealed again and again and again that, for example, our Civil War was not about states' rights, and it was not about economics, it was about slavery. Our historical responsibility is much greater than Poland's. Poland's job is a lot easier than the one we had. And as an American, I have to be modest because we have not always done a good job with our own American history. Again, Poland doesn't need a law to protect its reputation. The truth will do that just as well.
How widespread is this understanding for Poland's history and for Poland's role in the United States? Because we've heard President Trump speaking not too far away from this place last year. We've seen many high-level contacts between Polish government and the United States government. And yet, in the US press and in some expert circles, in some media, we can see very strong criticism. And the wording of this last statement of the State Department shows that this understanding for Poland's history and role may not be that well rooted within the administration itself.
Well, I think actually the State Department statement starts out with a recognition that tak zwane polskie obozy is historically false and offensive. That is more and more understood. And frankly, as an American, I was embarrassed when the Obama administration made that ridiculous statement. It was ridiculous and worse. It was frankly insulting, and there's no excuse for it. It was shameful. All right, it was just shameful. However, there is a much greater understanding of the truth of Poland's role. Now look, I'm about to retreat to Hollywood, but Hollywood and movies are a good sign of the kind of zeitgeist. All right, the movie, I understand it was not a great movie, but the movie The Zookeeper's Wife, right? It reflects a growing understanding. What is the role of Poland and of Poles? Well, they're all shown as heroic, noble, decent people doing their best under terrible circumstances. And that's a true, that was true. That was true. All right? That shows, and the fact that that movie was accepted, you know, it's Hollywood. I understand. Poles said to me that it was Hollywood kitsch. Yeah, I get that. But we're Americans, that's what we do, okay? Plusy I minusy. The fact is, and to be more serious, the level of discussion of Poland's role is enormously better than it was, and enormously more historically accurate. And it is Polish scholarship which has led the way.
You claimed that Poland will never have better understanding and better relations with the United States than with this current administration. Does Donald Trump personally have a feeling, special feelings about Poland, or is it a strategy?
Well, I would put it this way. Poland's friends were strong during the Clinton administration. They were strong during the Bush administration. And the pro-Polish coalition goes from left to right. When I said that the Trump administration, that Poland will not have a better friend, I meant, and I'll repeat, that the Trump administration, my friend and colleague, Assistant Secretary Wes Mitchell, is trying to lean forward and work with this Polish government and not to fall victim to some of the exaggerations that no one can work with this government. You know, I read that. This administration is trying to lean forward, and it needs some help from the Polish side. It needs some help from the Polish side to succeed.
On the other hand, Trump personally and this administration is said to have a very transactional approach to foreign relations. Do you think that, for instance, in terms of military procurement, the US president and the administration can, for instance, demand that Poland is buying more equipment in return for US military presence in Poland?
I think Trump's transactional approach is true, but it is not the whole truth. I think that the American administration under Trump, well, first under Obama in the last 2 years, and continued and deepened under Trump, has been to move the US-Polish security relationship and the NATO-Poland security relationship to a higher level. And this was Obama. Breaking with 30 years of American military drawdown in Europe, it's Obama who starts out with the reset, niefortunnie, and ends up stationing American forces on a rotational basis in Poland and supporting NATO's stationing of NATO non-US forces to the Baltic states. This is a very big deal. And it is to the credit of the Trump administration that they continued this Obama policy and deepened it. Full credit to Defense Secretary Mattis. Now, the Trump administration is willing to work with this Polish government, and this Polish government should take advantage of that. But that also means, well, I hope Poland helps us by not getting into unnecessary problems and by solving them, and let us help you solve them.
And finally, Ambassador Fried, what do you think is the current role of Poland in the wider region of Central and Eastern Europe. Polish leaders like to speak about this Free Seas initiative that seems to have a strong backing in the United States. But on the other hand, there is a suspicion in Europe that Poland again, and I will use that notorious phrase, will become a Trojan horse of United States in Europe. Yes, but this debate is still
I never
present.
had, but look, I never had much use for that theory, but here's how I see things. The Three Seas Initiative makes sense if it means strengthening energy and other infrastructure in this part of Europe, north to south. It's a good strategic play. This Polish government is right. I also don't like Nord Stream 2. Never have. I also like the idea of resisting Russian aggression, both the potential for military aggression and Russian disinformation and Russian, shall we say, questionable money. Now, Poland ought to be a leader in all three of these things. This government says it supports Three Seas, good. It supports strengthening Polish NATO security and Polish-US security cooperation, good. It supports efforts against Russian disinformation, I assume, and that's good. But to achieve these things, Poland needs to be working with Europe. Every country needs to pick its battles. We have a Russia problem. That is a problem of an aggressive revisionist Russia. Poland ought to be leading the way. Poland ought to be leading in Europe, and it was well poised to do so. That means I hope this government can find ways of figuring out how to stop or fix or control various unnecessary problems, reparations with Germany, sądownictwo, investment disputes with the United States. It needs to fix these things so to clear the field for us to work together on the things that really matter. And I think that's what the State Department statement says. It's an example, I think it was reflecting frustration from people in Washington who want to work with Poland. When Secretary Tillerson was just here, he didn't have to come here. Trump was just here, Tillerson didn't have to come here, but he did. He did because the United States is clearly signaling that it wants to work with Poland. Well, we need to work with Poland, keeping together the pro-Polish coalition which has existed for over 20 years in the United States. From right to left, Democrats and Republicans, all together. Polonia, Amerykańska, and a good part of the American Jewish community, the American Jewish Committee, jak na przykład. Wszyscy razem do przodu, coś takiego. We built that coalition in my day i musimy to utrzymywać dla dobrej przyszłości.
Ambassador Fried, thank you very much.
To ja dziękuję.
And stay tuned for more from Polityka Insight video.